Hi, I'm Melissa Valdez, Director of Client Experience for SBI. Our guest on today's podcast is Steve Grimshaw, the Chief Executive Officer for Caliber Collision. Steve joined us in person at the studio, SBI's Executive Briefing Center in Dallas, Texas. Steve has built an incredible business through both organic and inorganic growth. He's here today to demonstrate how a CEO orchestrates the right level of inorganic growth to maximize the valuation of your company. You don't want to miss this one. From SBI's Executive Briefing Center in Dallas, Texas, the most watched and listened to content in B2B sales and marketing, it's the SBI Podcast with your host, Matt Shares.
Welcome to the SBI Podcast, a weekly show dedicated to helping you make your number. Today, we're going to demonstrate how a CEO orchestrates the right level of inorganic growth to maximize the valuation of your company. My name is Matt Shares. I'm the CEO of SBI. I'm also your host. Joining me in the studio, as always, is my beloved co-host, Melissa Valdez. And Melissa's here to point you at resources that are going to advance you along the way to making your number.
Hello, Matt. Welcome to our audience.
Good to see you. And I'm thrilled about our guest today because joining me in person in the studio is Steve Grimshaw, who I consider to be a great personal friend. And Steve has been a CEO for almost a decade, and we've had a front row seat to watch what I would say is one of the most amazing growth stories in both organic and inorganic. And let me just orient the audience, and then I'm going to let Steve introduce himself. 250 million to 2.2 billion. I'm not a math major, but when you can go from and to, and those numbers go from millions to billions, you seem to know how to do something right. So Steve, welcome to the show. Welcome to the studio. Good to see you, brother. For the purpose of the audience, maybe introduce yourself, talk a little bit about Caliber, and then we'll jump into the show.
Sure. As Matt alluded, I joined Caliber in September 2009. It was a situation where revenue was flat. Actually, base revenue was declining. Top line revenue was flat because they had done a couple of acquisitions. They'd gone through a pretty ugly turnaround. Attitude wasn't great. Yeah. And fast forward to today, and back then it was 68 locations in 2 states, by the way. Today we're 533 locations, 17 states, Washington, D.C., as you said, $2.2 billion in revenue, adding between $400 and $500 million annually, and 11,000 teammates, and that makes us actually the largest collision repair company, as we say, in the world. We're the largest in the U.S., North America, and that by default makes us the largest.
I was just going to say, it's kind of like how they call the Super Bowl the World Championship.
That's correct.
Even though there's no football teams outside of the U.S.
There's no one larger than us today, and it all boils down to, as you can see the logo, it's a commitment from 11,000 team members to restore customers to the rhythm of their lives.
Yeah. So Steve and I we're gonna have some fun today. We're gonna talk about organic growth. We're gonna spend a lot of time on inorganic growth, and this is gonna be a demonstration that if I was talking to a CEO, which is who I serve in my role as CEO, I would tell you the playbook that Steve and his team executed and did it at scale. Anybody can have a good quarter or a good year. It's doing it at scale. So that's what we're going to talk about. So, Melissa, if you can maybe give the audience some guidance on how they would follow along what Steve and I are going to go through.
Yes, if I'm in the audience, I definitely want to follow along in my How to Make Your Number in 2018 workbook. If you have that handy, turn to the corporate strategy section on page 38. If you don't have this fantastic workbook yet, you need to go to sbi.tips/2018 workbook and download your copy. Thanks, Matt.
All right, let's jump into the questions. So, Steve, maybe to give the audience some context how to think about it. You walk in, as you said, right, morale was down, base revenue on decline, top line, it was all of those conditions. How did you make a decision relative to how much was going to be organic and how much was going to be inorganic? You perfected both of them, but how did you make the decision as a CEO back then?
That's a good question. So I was hired by private equity, which you well know what their expectations are. They had purchased the company in 2008, and obviously it wasn't performing, and the the CEO, the sitting CEO, actually quit at the first board meeting, just to give you the dynamics of
I forgot about that.
yes, of how this all started.
Yeah.
When I came in, there was kind of I'd done a lot of diligence on the company, the competitors, the market, the space, and it spent about 2 months really researching it. And I committed to doubling the revenues for this company in 5 years. Now, to say I knew exactly what I was going to do at that point in time, I didn't.
Yeah.
The one thing that I did know, though, was that we needed to go through a strategic planning process early on, and we really needed to understand what the company was really about and what is it that we were doing. What was it that we were delivering or servicing, or what were we selling, so to speak.
Yeah.
And this is where the whole concept of restoring the rhythm of your life came about. And one of the things that we saw, and I saw early on, was positioning a company in the collision space that was as focused on restoring a customer to their pre-accident condition to the best of our ability was probably more important than restoring the car to its pre-accident condition, which is what everyone did. And I viewed that as just, that's skin in the game. If you can't do that well, and you can't do it as well as everyone else, and if you can't do it in a cost-effective, high-quality manner, you don't even need to be in the business. Yeah. Understanding that every single customer that walked through your front door just went through a traumatic experience. Their whole world just got turned upside down. People don't realize how much we rely on our vehicles, and heaven help them that they didn't get injured on top of that. So really with that as an underlying purpose and theme, we actually went through a pretty rigorous strategic planning process where we went through and you know, I won't get into the details, but really going through the vision, the mission, developing the overarching strategy. So we kind of developed 4 legs of the stool, delivering operational consistency for quality, estimate accuracy, and cycle time. A complete focus on the customer, making sure that they were completely satisfied with every step of the repair process, and we'll talk more about that. Managing overall client costs. Very, very important to be the best at something, but you have to be competitive in doing that as well. And then having the best trained, most satisfied team members were really the 4 legs of the stool.
Got it.
And then we went through the exercise of, now, great, you're at 100,000, now I'm at 50, I want to get to 25, I got to get all the way down to the shop floor. So really developing a playbook or an operating manual of how to execute at the field level, and then really deciding on the investment on the people side as well. We did a great job doing all of that. But at the end of the day, we took a step back and said, you know, we really don't have a sales strategy now that's going to accomplish doubling the core business every 5 years.
And to set the scene on that, Steve, I mean, it wasn't like you were walking in to a technology that had a tailwind from the market in 2009, 2010, where you said, okay, the market's growing 27%. You know what? All I got to do with high tides raise all ships. I mean, this was sector-wise. What was the market growing?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the overall collision repair business, it probably fared through the recession better than most, just because it's a needed service. But best case scenario, it was flat, right? And even worse was the amount of overcapacity in the industry at the time. You had 34,000 body shops that there was a tremendous amount of capacity that carriers could basically send vehicles anywhere they wanted. And it doesn't sound like that long of a time ago, but in 2009, the complexity of repair vehicles wasn't that great, right? So this was really before the time of the electronics, the ADAS systems, the requirement to do pre and post scans, all of the different types of substrates they use today. I mean, vehicle technology over the last 8 years it's remarkable how it's changed. And so it's important to understand that, because that means any one of the 34,000 body shops could have done a good job repairing the vehicle at that point in time. So major overcapacity in the industry, you know, declining revenue, not a great culture. I won't tell you what my wife said when I called her to tell her I was quitting my job and going to work at Caliber. But look, once we had a very good idea of what the kind of the business strategy was when we went through the exercise, we knew that we had to develop a sales strategy that was able to accomplish and execute that. And And there was this group that I'd used at Safety Clean that had done a fairly good job. I remember the guy's name, Greg Alexander. He was phenomenal. I don't remember the other guy's name that came in.
Some other guy. Who
obviously,
was that guy?
it was Matt. But this is part of knowing what you don't know, right? We knew how to position the company. We knew, we were going to become a purpose-driven organization, and the reason for that is, purpose-driven organizations seem to be the buzz today. We were lucky enough to understand back in 2009, 2010 that if you can't get your people excited and passionate about coming to work every day, other than a paycheck, there's nothing that really differentiates you from any one of your competitors. Right. And really, when you kind of elevate the purpose of what they do every day about restoring a customer to their rhythm, it's actually an important service that you're providing. So our old concept was, we're in the customer service business, we just happen to fix cars. And so our entire goal at that point is we were going to create a customer experience from the initial time that you came into contact with Caliber until the final follow-up that was just going to be one of those blow your mind, wow things that you completely don't expect. Because I've been doing this now for almost 9 years, and I've asked this question every time I speak anywhere, and I don't care how many people in the audience, and that is, how many of you woke up this morning wanting to visit a body shop? I've never gotten anybody to raise their hand. So not only is it a traumatic experience, no one wants to come see you. Yeah. No one wants to get in an accident, and they don't trust the body shop industry, and probably deservedly so. But that doesn't mean that if once they show up and choose Caliber, that it can't be one of the greatest experiences that they go through. And I'll talk about that a little more, but one of the things I'm proud to say, our Net Promoter Score, and I know you're familiar with NPS, is 85.5% year to date in 2017.
That's amazing.
So think about that for a second, that you're creating an experience in an environment that customers are giving you an 85.5% Net Promoter Score, which is higher than Nordstrom, Apple, and any of the other kind of big hitters. So I would say we've accomplished it now, not so much then, but really working with you guys is where we started to understand, or where are the sales opportunities and what are the right levers that we start to pull as we execute, because you have to execute flawlessly, right? You have to have the people that are buying and passionate. But at some point in time, you have to have a sales strategy, and you have to have the resources and the structure to be able to fulfill that as well. And that's really where most of that was defined.
So for the audience, for the folks that are listening, and you hear Steve talk about the business strategy and where the sales strategy was a piece of that. Now we're going to unpack this concept of organic and inorganic. And while I was fortunate enough to have a front row seat of the organic piece, what I noticed is that tenet also ran through inorganic. So I guess, thinking about the CEOs listening to this, how did you dimension, or how have you dimensioned, because you've been through a couple of different sponsors as you move from on-cap, right, and sort of along the journey. How did you dimension, am I going to pick up 6 of my 10 points from organic, next year, 4 inorganic? What went into that? And then the follow-up to that is talking a little bit about the inorganic strategy and how you made a decision to say, from California and Texas, we're going to go to Arizona. Right. Because a good inorganic target that can integrate into what we do looks like this. So talk a little bit about that split.
It's actually a good question. So when we finalized really the overall sales strategy and the 5-year business plan, 25% was going to be organic, 75% was going to be inorganic, right, or acquisition. Yep. You can't double your revenue as an organization without acquisitions unless you're, I guess, a tech company. And so certainly not in the collision repair business. So we really created, as you recall, a strategic account management competency within the organization, with the understanding is not only did we want to be the ones that restored customers, but we wanted to become the trusted advisor for all of the top 20 carriers that really are responsible for filling our shops. 94% of all of our volume today still comes through the direct repair or DRP relationships that we have with carriers. So,
and for those listening, when Steve says a carrier, if you think about a
insurance carrier,
State Farm,
Allstate, Geico, USAA.
Right? So it's important to have this pause, because the way that he rattled off that number, the awareness of your market as a CEO. If you think about your number one job as a resource allocator, and you make investment decisions, Steve was very purposeful by saying, okay, I can't be everything to everybody, and I've got to say no a lot. And I've got to block out a lot of noise. I got my 25-75 organic, inorganic split. I know what's going to be driven in the organic. I know how I think about this purpose and mapping the client experience where the car is whatever, it's about the person. So now you've got that.
Yep.
The flywheel is starting to spin. How did you think about inorganic as a way to expand capabilities of what you all did? Or was your strategy, I've got core capabilities inside Caliber, we're going to buy less mature, and we're going to bring our capabilities and drop them in to these acquisitions that we make? How'd you think through that?
And it transitioned over time, as you might imagine. For us, for the acquisition or the inorganic side, is we started looking at the major markets that we operated in. And the first thing we did is start to identify where the opportunities are in these major markets.
Yeah.
And the reason for that, and by the way, that's still kind of the first priority for us today.
Yeah.
So if you look at our acquisition strategy kind of today, and I'll bounce back and forth from where it's started to where it is today, our number one priority is when we enter a market, full market penetration of that market. Okay? And the main reason for that from a customer's perspective is it drives customer convenience and customer choice. Right? So an example is Dallas-Fort Worth. I have 40 locations in Dallas-Fort Worth.
Yep.
I have an average of 10 bays. I have 400 bays available to my customers and my carriers. I mean, we basically have two customers in every transaction, so to speak. So I'm more convenient than virtually anyone else in the marketplace. And then the second piece is really all of the benefits of a well laid out cluster strategy, which is obviously very prevalent in the retail arena.
Yep.
So when you think about a cluster strategy, and I have full market penetration, I can load level cars.
Yep.
I can load level resources.
Yep.
I can leverage my relationships, and I can actually leverage my purchasing power.
Yep.
So I could actually operate better and more profitably and fill the centers up quicker based on a fully penetrated kind of acquisition strategy within a given market, much more so than jumping all over the United States just to say I want to shade in a state because I want to say I'm in that state, so to speak. That's our number one priority from an acquisition growth perspective.
How did you, so Steve, on that, so if I'm a CEO and I hear you say full market penetration the way you defined it, was there a number in your head that said full market penetration relative to the market we're in? Like, how did you answer that?
So there was, it started with opinions, which you know how much I like those.
Yeah. You love non-data, non-fact-based opinions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you actually look at the map for Caliber, you'll see that it replicates what people refer to as the retail smiley belt. So we're in the west, the southwest, right, through the southeast, up the east coast. And people wonder, well, why aren't you in the Midwest and why aren't you in the Northeast? Well, if you look at from a body shop perspective, where are people moving?
Yep.
Where are miles driven increasing faster than anywhere else? And it's in the markets that we operate in today.
Yep.
California's the number one market. Texas is the number two market. The 17 states that we operate in today, I could triple in size and never enter another state. That's how much opportunity is there. So what ended up taking place is it went from, our opinion is, it could support 20 centers till we actually started developing a site selection competency where we actually created metrics and we do heat maps in every existing market and every market that we're interested in. We don't even actually have to be in the market because what we've developed over time is the same type of competency where we have about 8 to 10 metrics that we've applied and pulled out of our most successful centers and areas that we now apply. We heat map areas, and we actually go in and we pick what we consider to be the best corners now. I don't care where you have a body shop. As a matter of fact, we build 50% of our shops today. It was 100% acquisition strategy 8 years ago. It's under 50% acquisition, over 50% greenfield, brownfields. Because what we do today is we find the best corner, and then we start working backwards. Is there dirt for sale? Is there a building that can be remodeled? Is there a dealer with a body shop or a dealer that's willing to partner and build one on site? Who are the acquisition candidates? And then between the acquisition team and the operators, we prioritize these and then start working the list.
All right, so If you are a CEO and you hear the level of clarity that Steve just walked through, a couple things that should stand out to you as we get ready to take our first break. The first is that the strategy changed over time. So Steve talked about a journey that they went on, setting a foundation and what that looked like. Then he talked about how Inorganic, how the way that they look at a city now, working backwards from the dirt, love the retail smiley belt, site location competency. So all of the things that are very natural to Steve and his business. If I was a CEO, the question I would be asking is, do I have that same level and that framework that I'm thinking about my inorganic growth now, but also I've got to think out year as I build those competencies. So Steve and I are going to take a quick break. Fortunately, we have alcohol in the studio, and we are going to have a quick sip. Melissa, I think you've got something to share with the audience.
It's like a rock star taking a shot at a concert or something.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
That's
exactly
right.
like two rock stars. In
Even
the
Bon
studio.
Jovi takes an intermission.
Absolutely. Well, for those of you who are listening, it's a new year, which means a new number. You might be wondering how you are going to make your new revenue target for the year. SBI has a special tool just for you that will help you evaluate the probability of you making said number. We've got a lot of year left, so I strongly recommend you take advantage of this tool. You'll find it at sbi.tips/revenue growth diagnostic, and it's a 10 to 15 minute questionnaire where you will answer these questions, and the output of that is a roadmap to help you succeed in making your number. And who doesn't want that, right, Matt?
All right, everybody. We hope you enjoyed the show, and as always, I wish you the best of luck as you try and make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on the studio, SBI's Executive Briefing Center, our team, or to schedule a workshop, please visit salesbenchmarkindex.com.